Did you hear what I was playing, Lane?
I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
Well, I'm so sorry. For your sake, honestly. Why, I don't play the piano accurately. Anyone could play the piano accurately, but I play with such wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte, for I keep signs for life.
Yes, sir.
By the way, did you prepare the cucumber sandwiches for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
Also, I saw last night that there had been entered as been consumed 8 bottles and a pint of champagne.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why on earth do servants so invariably drink at a bachelor's establishment? I asked merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of wine, sir. I have often observed that in married households, the champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Is marriage so demoralized as that?
I present state, sir. I've only been married once, and that was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't think I care much about your family life, Lane.
No, sir. It is not a very interesting subject. I never think of it myself.
Very natural, I'm sure.
Yes,
Thank you. That will be all.
Thank you.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Honestly, if the lower orders aren't there to set us a good example, what on earth is the purpose of them? I feel like, as a class, they all seem to lack a sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthing?
Why, hello, Jack. What brings you on up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring one anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algy.
Well, I believe it is customary to have some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since Thursday?
In the country.
What on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
How immensely you must amuse them. Who are the people you amuse?
Neighbours.
Got nice neighbors in your part of Shropshire?
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
You must amuse them so much. By the way, Shropshire is your country, is it not?
Shropshire. Yes, of course. Hello. Why all these cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who's coming to tea?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolyn.
How perfectly delightful.
Though I don't know if Aunt Augusta would quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
The way you flirt with Gwendolyn is perfectly disgraceful. Almost as bad as the way Gwendolyn flirts with you.
I'm in love with Gwendolyn. I've come to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you had came up to town for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
There is nothing romantic in proposing. Why, there is some romance in being in love, but nothing romantic in a definite proposal. One may be accepted. One usually is, I suppose. But then the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If I ever get married, I'll certainly try to forget the fact.
I have no doubt about that, dear Algy. The divorce court was specially invented for those people whose memories are so curiously constituted.
There's no use speculating. Divorces are made in heaven. Please, do not go for the cucumber sandwiches. Those are made specially for Aunt Augusta.
Well, you have been eating them all the time.
Oh, yes, but that is very different, for Aunt Augusta is my own relations. Have some bread and butter instead. The bread and butter is for Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn is devoted to bread and butter.
And very good bread and butter it is, too.
You need not eat as if you were going to eat it all. Why, you aren't even married to Gwendolyn yet, and I doubt you ever will be.
Why on earth would you say that?
Well, first of all, girls never marry the men that they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't. And it comes with a numerous number of bachelors you see all over London. And besides, I don't give you my consent.
Your consent?
Before I give you my consent for you marrying my cousin, we must first clear up the whole matter of Cecily first.
Cecily? What do you mean, Algy? What do you mean by Cecily? I don't know anyone of the name of Cecily.
Lane, please bring me the cigarette case Mr. Worthing left here the last time he dined with us.
Do you mean to say you had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you would let me know. I've been running frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. It's very nearly offering a large reward.
I wish you would. I'm unusually hard up at the moment.
Well, there's no use offering a large reward now that the thing's found.
That is so absurdly mean of you. But it makes no matter, for now that I look at the inscription inside, I see that this isn't yours at all.
Of course it is. You've seen me with it 100 times. Besides, you have no right whatsoever to read what's written inside. It's a very ungentlemanly thing to do to read a private cigarette case.
Who are you to tell me what one can or cannot read? Why, half of modern culture already depends on what one cannot read.
I'm well aware of the fact, and I don't propose to discuss modern culture. It isn't the sort of thing one should talk of in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This is a gift from someone of the name of Cecily. And you said you didn't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you must know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, charming old lady she is too. Lives at Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back to me, Algie.
Yes, but why on earth would your aunt call herself Little? From little Cecily, with her fondest love.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. That doesn't matter that surely an aunt be allowed to decide for herself. You seem to think that every aunt should be exactly like your aunt. That's absurd. For heaven's sake, give me back my cigarette case.
Yes, but why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, why would she call you her uncle? To Uncle Jack, with her fondest love from dear little Cecily. I cannot deny that your aunt might be quite small, but why on earth would she call you uncle? And besides, your name isn't Jack at all. You said it was Ernest.
It isn't Ernest, it's Jack.
Yes, but when you first introduced yourself to me, you said your name was Ernest. And so I introduced you to others as Ernest. You talk like an Ernest. You walk like an Ernest. Why, by all means, you look like an Ernest. Here, you left your business card with me the last time you dined with us. And here we go. Mr. Ernest Worthing, before the Albany. I shall be holding on to this if you ever try to deny it to me or anybody like Gwendolyn that your name is not, in fact, Ernest.
Well, my name is Ernest in town and Jack in the country, and the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that does not make sense on why your small Aunt Cecily, who lives in Tunbridge Wells, calls you her uncle. Come on, old boy. You had much better have it out at once.
My dear Algie, you talk exactly as if you were a dentist. It's very vulgar to talk like a dentist when one isn't a dentist. Produces a false impression.
Why, yes. That is exactly what dentists do. I must say, I always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist. Now I am quite sure of it.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by a Bunburyist?
I will produce for you the meaning of that invaluable expression if you explain to me why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now produce your explanation. And pray, make it improbable.
My dear Algie, there's nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it's perfectly ordinary. The old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me, in his will, guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle for motives of respect you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Where is that place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You are not going to be invited. I may tell you quite candidly, the place is not in Shropshire.
I suspected that. I have Bunburied all over Shropshire. Now, that still does not quite explain it. Why do you go by Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear Algie, I don't know if you'll ever be able to understand my real motives. You are hardly serious enough. When one is placed in the position of guardian, one must adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It's one's duty to do so. As a high moral tone cannot be said to conduce much to one's health or one's happiness. To get up to town, I have always pretended to have a younger brother, by the name of Ernest, who lives in Albany and gets into the most dreadful of scrapes. That, my dear Algie, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is never pure and rarely ever simple. Why, modern literature would be a complete impossibility.
That wouldn't be at all a bad thing.
Yes, we should much better leave the writing up to those who haven't been to university. They do it so well in the daily papers. What you really are is a Bunburyist.
What on earth do you mean?
You have created an alter ego, your brother, named Ernest, and you make up that he gets into the most dreadful of scrapes so that you can leave the country whenever you would like. I have created the most invaluable invalid that goes by the name of Bunbury. You see, Bunbury is quite the dreadful invalid. He just happens to be sick on so many days and allows me to get out of so many dinner parties with my Aunt Augusta. That is exactly how you and I shall be going to Willis's tonight.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know. And it's so rude of you. Why, one of the things people hate most is not receiving invitations.
You had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
There is no way that I shall be doing anything of the nature. First of all, Aunt Augusta always treats me like a member of the family, and she sends me down to the dinner table with no moment at all, or two. Secondly, I know exactly who I will be dining with tonight. Miss Mary Farquhar. She's always flirting with her husband across the dinner table. Perfectly scandalous. Why, there's been an uptick in women doing that all over London. It is perfectly ridiculous. Like washing one's own clean linen in public. Besides, now that I know you are a confirmed Bunburyist, I'd love to talk to you about it over dinner. I wanted to tell you the rules.
But I am not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolyn accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. In fact, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily's a little too much interested in him, it is rather a bore. So I'll have got rid of Ernest, and I strongly advise you do the same with with your invalid friend with the absurd name.
I will never part with Bunbury. He's invaluable, and I hope you do not do the same. Why, any married man who does not know Bunbury will have a very tedious time of it.
That is nonsense. If I marry a nice, charming girl like Gwendolyn, she's the only girl I ever saw in my life that I would marry. I certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. You seem to forget that in the British household, 3 is company and 2 is none.
That, my dear young friend, is the theory that the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the last 50 years.
Yes, but the British household has proved in half the time.
For heaven's sake, don't try to be cynical. It's perfectly easy to be cynical.
It is perfectly hard to be anything these days, with all the beastly competition about. Oh, that must be my Aunt Augusta. No one ever rings the doorbell in quite such a Wagnerian manner. Whether her or creditors, of course. Now, if I get Aunt Augusta out of the way for, say, 10 minutes or so, will you dine with me at Willis's tonight?
I suppose so, if you want to.
And I very much so do. But you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals. It is so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell, Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, my dear Algernon. I trust you are behaving very well.
Yes, I am feeling quite well.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
My goodness, Gwendolyn, you are so smart.
I am always smart, aren't I, Mr. Worthing?
You're quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I'm not that. It will leave no room for development, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we were a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on dear Lady Horbury. I had not been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looked quite 20 years younger, and now I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Yes, of course. Oh my goodness. Dear heavens! Lane! Where are all the cucumber sandwiches I especially made for Aunt Augusta?
No cucumber sandwiches in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
Really? No cucumber sandwiches in the market?
No, sir, not even for ready money.
Dear heavens, that is so worrisome. Thank you, Lane. That'll be all.
Thank you, sir.
I am so sorry, Aunt Augusta. I can't believe that there were no cucumbers in the market this morning. Not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Horbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
Yes, I had heard that her hair had turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed color. From what cause, I, of course, cannot say. Thank you. I've got quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. She is such a nice woman and so attentive to her husband. It is delightful to watch them.
I'm so sorry to tell you this, but I have just received a telegram that Paul Bunbury, he is quite ill again, and the doctors seem to think I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
I'm sorry. He is just quite the invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, that I think it is high time that Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or die. This silly sallying with the question is absurd. Nor do I in any way approve of the modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. I'm always telling that to your poor uncle, but he has yet to take much notice, as far as any improvements to his ailments goes. I'd be much obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury, from me, to be so kind as to not have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. One wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season, when everyone has practically said everything they had to say, which, in most cases, was probably not much.
Yes, I will make sure to tell Bunbury, if he is still conscious, that is, when I arrive, that I will not be able to be with him on Saturday, and I shall be able to be with you. But, about that, I wanted to go over the arrangement with you. You see, about music, if you play something too good, people won't talk at all. But if you play something too bad, people will talk a little too much. I'd love for you to accompany me to the piano room, so you could go over and find the most perfect arrangement.
Thank you, Algernon. I'm sure the program will be delightful after a few expurgations. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People always seem to think they're improper and look socked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. But German sounds to me a thoroughly respectable language, and indeed, I believe is so. Gwendolyn, you will accompany me?
Certainly, Mamma.
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray, don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else. And that always makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I am never wrong.
I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I have often had to speak to her about.
Gwendolyn, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any girl I have ever met in my entire life. Since I met you.
Yes, I'm quite aware of that fact. And I often wish that in public, at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you had always been an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines, and has reached the provincial pulpits, I am told. But my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Ernest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Ernest, well, I knew I was destined to love you.
Do you really love me, Gwendolyn?
Passionately.
Darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Ernest.
But you don't really mean to say you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest.
But your name is Ernest.
Yes, of course it is. But supposing it was something else, do you mean to say you couldn't love me then?
Well, that is clearly a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, has absolutely no reference at all to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Well, Gwendolyn, to speak quite honestly, I don't much care for the name of Ernest. I don't think the name suits me at all.
Oh, but it suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolyn, I think there's lots of other much nicer names. I think Jack, for instance, a charming name.
Jack? No, there is very little music in the name of Jack, if any at all. Indeed, it does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, were more than usually plain. Besides, Jack's notorious domesticity for John, and I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. She would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only really safe name is Ernest.
Gwendolyn, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once. There's no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, yes. Surely you know that I love you, and you have led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you are not absolutely indifferent to me.
I adore you, but you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject has not even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity, and to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolyn.
Yes, Mr. Worthing? What have you got to say to me?
You know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long have you been about it? I'm afraid you have very little experience in how to propose.
My own one. I've never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. What wonderfully blue eyes you have, Ernest. They're quite blue. I hope you will always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing! Rise, sir, from the semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. And besides, Mr. Worthing is not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Pardon me. You are nothing of the kind. When you do become engaged to someone, I or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement to come on a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant, as the case may be. It is hardly a matter that she could be allowed to decide for herself. And now, I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. While I am making my inquiries, you, Gwendolyn, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mamma!
In the carriage, Gwendolyn. The carriage.
Yes, Mamma.
The carriage! Mr. Worthing, you may take a seat.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that you're not down on my list of eligible young men, although I have quite the same list as the dear Duchess of Bolton. We work together, in fact. However, I am quite ready to enter your name, should your answers be what a truly affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I smoke.
I'm glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. I have always been of the opinion that a man who desires to get married should know everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I am pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate, exotic fruit. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. This whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately in England, at any rate, it produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove a serious danger to the upper classes and would probably lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or in investments?
In investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What between the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted from one after one's death, land has ceased to be either a profit nor a pleasure. It gives one possession and it prevents one from keeping it up. That is all that can be said about land.
Well, I have a country house with some land attached to it, of course. About 1,500 acres, I believe, but I don't depend on that for my real income. In fact, from what I can make out, the poachers are the only people who make anything out of it.
A country house. How many bedrooms? Well, that point can be cleared up afterwards. You have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature, like Gwendolyn, could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
Well, I own a house in Belgrove Square, but it's let by the year to a Lady Bloxham. Of course, I can get it back whenever I like at 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham? I don't know her.
She goes about very little. She's a lady considerably advanced in years.
Ah, nowadays that is no guarantee of respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I knew there was something. However, that could easily be altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Both, if necessary, I presume. Is there a problem with that?
No.
All right, now to minor matters. What are your politics?
I'm afraid I really have none. I'm a liberal unionist.
Oh, they count as toys. They dine with us. Or they come in the evening, at any rate. Another minor matter. Are your parents living?
I have lost both of my parents.
Both? To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune, To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Tell me, was he born in what the radical papers call the purple of commerce, or did he rise from the ranks of the aristocracy?
Well, I'm afraid I really don't know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I said I had lost my parents, but it would be nearer to the truth to say my parents seem to have lost me. I don't know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found?
Yes, the late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an old gentleman of a very kindly and charitable disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing, because he happened to have a first-class ticket for Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It's a seaside resort.
And where did this charitable gentleman with a first-class ticket for a seaside resort find you?
A handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, a handbag. A somewhat large black leather handbag with handles to it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
And in what locality did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew find this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake for his own.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station.
Yes, the Brighton line.
The line is immaterial. Mr. Worthing, I must confess I feel somewhat bewildered about what you just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred, in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life that remind one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. And I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to. Now, as for the particular locality in which this handbag was found, a cloakroom at a railway station might serve to conceal a social indiscretion, has probably, indeed, been used for that purpose before now. But it could hardly be regarded as an assertive basis for a recognized position in good society.
Well, then, may I ask what you would have me do? I need hardly say I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to make a definite effort to produce some relations, and at any rate to produce one parent, of either sex, before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't see how I could possibly do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. It's in my dressing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What on earth has that to do with me? You can hardly imagine that I and Lord Bracknell would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel. Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Good morning. For heaven's sake, Algie, don't play that ghastly tune. How idiotic you are.
So, old boy, how did it go? Oh, no. You don't mean to say Gwendolyn rejected you, did she? She has a horrible way of doing that.
Now, Gwendolyn is as right as a trivet. As far as she is concerned, we are engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. Never met such a gorgon. I don't really know what a gorgon is like, but I'm quite sure that Lady Bracknell is one. She's a monster without being a myth, which is rather unfair. I beg your pardon, Algie. I suppose I shouldn't talk of your own aunt in that way before you.
Oh, no, I quite love hearing my own relations abused. All they are a significant group of people with no idea on how to live and not even the slightest inclination on when to die.
That is nonsense.
It isn't. Now, would you want to sit here and argue about it, or what?
Well, I have a plan to get rid of my brother Ernest. I'll say he died in Paris of apoplexy. Loads of people die of apoplexy, quite suddenly, don't they?
Yes, but it is something hereditary. It's something that runs in families, you know. You would much better say he died of a severe chill.
And you're sure a severe chill isn't hereditary or anything of the kind?
Of course it isn't.
Very well then. My poor brother Ernest was carried off quite suddenly in Paris by a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
What about your dear Cecily? You said she was quite attached to Ernest. Won't you feel that quite a great deal?
Oh, that is quite all right. Cecily isn't a silly, romantic girl, I'm glad to say. She has a capital appetite, goes on long walks, and pays no attention at all to her lessons.
I would quite like to meet Cecily.
I will take very good care you never do. She's excessively pretty, and she's only just 18.
Oh? Well, have you ever told dear Gwendolyn that you have an excessively pretty ward that is only just 18?
One doesn't just blurt these things out to people, Algie. Gwendolyn and Cecily are perfectly certain to be extremely great friends. I'll bet you anything you like, a half hour after they meet, they'll be calling each other sister.
It takes so much more for women to start calling each other sister. Now, do you know what time it is? It is just about 7, and we must go and change if we are going to make it to Willis's tonight on time.
It is always nearly 7.
Well, yes, that is because I am always hungry.
Never knew you when you weren't.
What shall we do after dinner tonight? Shall we go to the theatre?
Oh no, I loathe listening.
How about we go to the club?
Oh no, I hate talking.
How about we trot around the Empire, say 10:15?
Oh no, I can't bear looking at things. It's so silly.
Then what shall we do?
Nothing.
It is perfectly hard to do nothing. But I do not mind as long as there's no definite work of any kind.
Miss Fairfax?
Gwendolyn, upon my word.
Algie, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
I don't know. I'm afraid I don't know if I can let you do that.
Algie, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life. You are not quite old enough to do that.
My own one.
Scoot over, darling. Ernest, we may never be married. From the look on Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Whatever influence I had over Mamma, I lost at the age of 3. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else, and marry often, nothing she can possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Dear Gwendolyn.
Your romantic origin, as related to be my mamma with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. Your address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Walton, Hertfordshire.
There was good postal service, I suppose. It may be necessary to do something desperate.
My own darling.
How long do you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Good. Algie, you may turn round now.
Oh, I already have.
You may also ring the bell.
You'll let me see you to your carriage, my own darling?
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
A glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes, sir.
You know what? I think I'm going to go out.
Yes, sir.
Probably won't be back till Monday. So go ahead and pack all my suits, my neckties, and all of the Bunbury suits.
Yes, sir.
I hope tomorrow shall be a great day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
What a perfect pessimist you are, Lane.
I do my best to give satisfaction, sir.
Thank you, Lane. That'll be all.
There is a sensible, intellectual girl. The only girl I ever cared for in my life. What on earth are you so amused at?
Oh, I'm just thinking about my poor friend Bunbury.
If you don't take care, your poor friend Bunbury will get you into a serious scrape someday.
Oh, but I love scrapes. They're the only things that are never serious.
Well, that is nonsense. You never talk anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does.
Surely such a utilitarian occupation as the watering of flowers is merely molten stew than yours, especially when intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray, open to page 15. We'll repeat yesterday's lesson.
I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I myself know perfectly well that I look quite plain after my German lesson.
You know very well your guardian wants you to excel in every way possible, and he laid particular stress on your German before he left town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays stress on your German before he leaves town.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes I think he is so serious he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity demeanor is expected to be commended on for extremely how young he is. I know no one who has more duty and responsibility.
I suppose that's why he often looks quite bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I'm surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life, and ideal merriment, and you know the constant anxiety he has about the unfortunate young man, his brother.
I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here and visit us sometimes. We'd have a great influence over him, Miss Prism. You certainly would. You know German and geology, and things of that kind have a great influence over a man.
I don't think even I could produce any effect on that unfortunate young man, when even his brother says he is ideally Merriman. I don't understand why you have a diary, Cecily. It is not very kind.
I keep a diary in order to enter all the wonderful secrets of my life.
Memory.
If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is a diary we keep with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles the things that haven't happened and couldn't have quite possibly happened. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all the 3-volume novels Moody sends us.
Do not speak slightly of those 3-volume novels, Cecily. I wrote one in earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are. I hope it did not end happily. I do not like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily, and the unhappily. That's what fiction means.
I suppose so, but it seems so very unfair. And was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The novel was unfortunately abandoned, or as I say, lost. To your work, child, the speculations are profitless.
But I see Dr. Chausible coming up through the garden.
Dr. Chausible, this is indeed a surprise.
And how are we this morning? Miss Prism, I believe you to be well.
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good to have a short stroll with you in the park, Dr. Chausible.
I did not say anything about a headache, Cecily.
I know that, Miss Prism, but I felt instinctively that you had a headache. In fact, I was thinking about that, and not about my German lesson when the rector came in.
Well, Cecily, I hope you aren't being inattentive.
I'm afraid I am.
That's awfully strange. See, if I was Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically. By metaphor being drawn from bees. Mr. Worthing, I believe he hasn't come back to town yet.
We do not expect him till Monday afternoon.
Yes, he does like to spend his Sundays in London. He isn't a man whose sole aim is pleasure. By all accounts, that unfortunate young man, his brother, seems to be. Well, I shall not disturb Egeria and her pupil any longer.
I think I do have a headache, Dr. Chausible. I think a walk in the park would do it some good.
Perfectly, perfectly. Shall we go to the schools and back?
Indeed. In my absence, Cecily, you will read your political economy. The chapter on the rector is indeed delightful.
Horrid political economy! Horrid geography! Horrid German!
Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven over from the station. He's brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, before the Albany. Uncle Jack's brother. Did you tell him Uncle Jack was in town?
Yes, miss. He seems so disappointed. I mentioned that you and Miss Prism in the garden. He said he was anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
Tell Mr. Worthing to come out here. And I suppose you had better talk to the housekeeper about arranging a room for him.
Yes, miss.
I have never really met any wicked person before. I'm so afraid he'll look just like everyone else. He does!
Why? You must be my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
You are under some strange mistake. I am not little. I believe I am more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily, and you, as I see from your card, are my guardian's brother, Mr. Ernest Worthing, my wicked cousin Ernest.
Wicked? My dear Cecily, you mustn't think that I'm wicked.
If you are not, then you have certainly been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. Being really good all the time and pretending to be wicked. That would be hypocrisy.
Oh, yes. I I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
You know, Cecily, I have been rather bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that, though I am sure it must have been very pleasant.
It's much pleasanter being here with you.
I don't understand how you were here at all. Uncle won't arrive till Monday afternoon.
Yes, that is quite the disappointment, but sadly I must leave by the earliest train on Monday morning. You see, I have a business appointment in London that I am anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Well, I know, of course, how important it is to not keep business engagements if one wants to retain any sense of the beauty of life. Though I still think you should wait till Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to talk to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
You're emigrating. He's gone up to buy your outfit.
Well, I certainly would never let Jack buy my outfit. He has no taste in neckties at all.
I don't think you will require neckties. Uncle's sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night you'd have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Oh, well, Cecily, the accounts I've heard of the next world in Australia are not particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me, Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
I'm afraid I'm not that. But perhaps you could reform me. Maybe you could make that your mission.
I'm afraid I've got no time this afternoon.
Then how would you feel about me reforming myself this afternoon?
It is rather quixotic of you, but I think you should give it a try.
I will. I feel better already.
You're looking a little worse.
That is because I am hungry.
Oh, how thoughtless of me. I should have remembered that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Yes. Oh, and might I have a buttonhole first? I never have any appetite unless I've had a buttonhole first.
A Marshal Neal.
I'd sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
'Cause you are like a pink rose, Cousin Cecily.
I don't think it can be quite right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady.
You are the prettiest girl I've ever saw.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
They are a snare that every sensible man would love to be caught in.
Oh, I don't think I would care to catch a sensible man. I shouldn't know what to talk to him about.
Dr. Chausible, you are too much alone. You should get married. A missing rope, I understand. A woman rope, never.
Trust me, I do not need such neologistic of a phrase. You know, as a precept, and along with the primitive church, was distinctly against matrimony.
That is why the primitive church has not lasted to present day. I see that when men remain single, they become a public temptation.
Well, is a man not equally attractive when married?
Sometimes not even to his wife.
And in some cases, not even to her.
That depends on the intellectual sympathies of women. Young women are green. I speak horticulturally. My metaphor comes from fruit. But where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to the schools.
Mr. Worthing,
Mr. Worthing!
this is indeed a surprise. We did not expect you till Monday afternoon.
Mr. Worthing, please don't tell me this garb betokens some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More debts and extravagance?
Still leading his life of pleasure?
Dead.
Your brother, Ernest, dead?
Quite dead.
Well, Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolence, and you deserve the consolation of knowing that you were the most giving and kind of brothers.
Poor Ernest. He had his faults, but it is a sad, sad blow.
As a man sows, so shall he reap.
It's very sad indeed. Were you with him in the last?
No, he died abroad, in Paris, in fact. I got a telegram just last night from the manager of the Grand Hotel.
What was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
Wow. Well, I am also quite susceptible to drafts. The intimate will no doubt take place here.
No, he seemed to have expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris! This shows no sign of a right mind in the last. Well, you will no doubt have me draw an allusion to this tragic domestic affliction next Sunday? Well, my sermon on the meaning of mana in the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion. Joyful, or in this present case, distressing. I have preached at harvest celebrations, days of humiliation, festal days, confirmations, and christenings. The last time I preached was at the cathedral for the charity of the prevention of discontent among the upper orders. The bishop, who was present, was very struck by some of the allusions I've drawn.
That reminds me, you mentioned christenings, didn't you, Dr. Chausible? I trust you know how to christen all right. I mean, you are continually christening, aren't you?
Well, Mr. Worthing, is there any infant you're fond of?
No, it is not for any baby, dear doctor. The fact is, I would like to be christened myself, this afternoon if you've nothing better to do.
Well, Mr. Worthing, would you not christened already?
I don't remember anything about it.
Do you have any grave doubts on the subject?
I certainly intend to have, but I don't know if the thing would bother you at all, or if you think I'm a little too old now.
Well, not at all. The sprinkling and the immersion is a perfectly canonical practice among adults.
Immersion?
Sprinkling is all that's necessary, and I believe to be advisable. Our weather is so changeable. At what time would you like the ceremony to permit?
I might trot round about 5 if that would suit you.
Perfectly, perfectly. In fact, I have 2 other ceremonies to conduct at the exact same time. A case of twins at one of the outlying cottages of your own estate. Poor Carter, a much hard-working man.
I don't see much fun in being christened alongside of the babies. Would 5:30 do?
Oh, admirably, admirably, Mr. Worthing. I shall not trod in a house of sorrow. However, I would like to leave you with this. What seems to us as bitter trials might be a blessing in disguise.
This seems to me a blessing of extremely obvious kind.
Go and change them.
My child! My child!
Uncle Jack, what is the matter? Do you look happy? You look as if you had a toothache. And I have such great news for you. Guess who's in the dining room? Your brother. Your brother. He arrived about a half an hour ago.
What nonsense. I haven't got a brother.
Oh, don't say that. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother. You couldn't be as so heartless as to disown him. You know what? I'll go and get him, and you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
Well, this is very surprising news, Mr. Worthing.
As we just resigned to his death, he's here.
My brother's in the dining room. I don't know what it all means. I think it's perfectly absurd. Good heavens.
Hello, Brother John. I've come down from town to tell you that I am very sorry for all the troubles I have caused you, and I'm here to live a better life from here on out in the future.
Uncle Jack, you are not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. I think his coming here disgraceful. He knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There's some good in everyone. In fact, Ernest has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit so often. And surely there must be so much good in someone who leaves the pleasures of London to sit by a bed of pain.
Oh, he's been talking to you about Bunbury, has he?
Oh yes, he's told me all about his poor friend, Mr. Bunbury, and his terrible state of health.
Bunbury? Well, I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury or anything else. It's enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
I must say, the faults all are on my side. But there is something peculiarly hurtful about this entire situation. You know, especially since this is my first time coming here.
Uncle Jack, if you do not shake hands with Ernest, I'll never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never, never.
Well, then this is the last time I shall ever do it.
Isn't it amazing to see a perfect reconciliation of brothers?
Cecily, you will come with us?
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You've done an amazing thing, my dear child.
We must not be premature in our decisions.
I feel so happy.
You young scoundrel, Algy, you must get out of this place as soon as possible. I don't allow any bumbering here.
I put Mr. Ernest's things in the room next to your own, sir. I suppose that's all right.
What?
Mr. Ernest's luggage, sir. I've unpacked it and put in the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dress case, 2 hot boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can only stay for about a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Ernest has been suddenly called back to town.
Yes, sir.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack! I've not been called back to town at all!
Yes, you have.
I haven't heard anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman has never once interfered with my pleasures in the slightest degree.
I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily's a darling.
You are not to talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like the way you're dressed. You look perfectly ridiculous in that. I think it is perfectly childish. You are sitting here mourning someone who's going to stay with you for an entire week. I call it grotesque.
You are certainly not staying with me for an entire week, as a guest or anything else. You've got to leave by the 4:05 train.
Jack, you would stay with me if I was in mourning. I would think it unkind if you didn't. So mustn't I stay here with you? Wouldn't it be so unkind if I did not do the same?
Will you go if I change my clothes?
Only if you do not take too long. I have never seen anyone take so long to dress with such little result.
Well, it is better than being always overdressed as you are.
If I am occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by being immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous, your conduct an outrage, and your presence in my garden utterly absurd. However, you've got to leave by the 4:05. I hope you have a pleasant journey back to town. This bumbering, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I think this has been a great success. I'm in love with Cecily, and that is everything. I must go and find her to make an appointment for my next Bunbury. Oh, there she is!
Oh, I merely came back to watch the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
No, he's gone to order the dog cart for me.
Is he taking you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Then have we got to part?
I'm afraid so.
Parting from old friends one can always endure with equanimity, but parting from those whom one has just met is almost always unbearable.
Thank you, Cecily.
The dog cart is waiting at the door, sir.
It can wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
I hope I do not offend you when I say this, dear Cecily, but to me, you are the visible personification of perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you won't mind me writing your remarks into my diary. Oh, Ernest, don't cough. When one is dictating, one should speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, ever since I have first laid my eyes upon you, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, and hopelessly.
I don't think you should tell me that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, and hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't make much sense, does it?
Cecily! You know what? Go ahead and tell the cart to come around next week, that same hour.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very annoyed if he knew you were staying until next week at the same hour.
Yeah? Well, I don't care what Uncle Jack thinks, or what the rest of the world thinks, for that matter. I only care about you, Cecily. You love me, don't you? You will marry me.
Why, of course, silly boy. We've been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months?
Yes, it'll be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But how did we come to be engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a wicked and bad brother, you, of course, form the chief top of conversation between Miss Prism and I. And any man who is so often talked about is always very attractive. I dare say it was foolish of me, Ernest, but I fell in love with you.
Okay, but when was our engagement actually settled?
On February the 14th last, worn out by your utter ignorance to my existence. After a long struggle with myself, I accepted you under this dear old tree here. And the next day, I bought this little ring in your honor and this little bangle with the true lover's knot I promised you always to wear.
Wow, they're quite pretty, aren't they?
Yes, you've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've always given you for leading such a bad life. And this is the box where I keep all of your dear letters.
My letters? But Cecily, I never wrote you any letters.
You need hardly to remind me of that, Ernest. I had to write them for you. I wrote 3 times a week and sometimes oftener.
I wish you would let me read them.
Oh, I couldn't possibly. They would make you far too conceited. The 3 you wrote to me when I broke off our engagement are so beautiful, yet so badly spelled, that even now I can hardly read them without crying a little.
But was our engagement ever broken off?
Yes, on March 22nd. You can see the entry if you'd like. Today I broke off my engagement with Ernest. I feel it's better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
But what had I done? I had done nothing. Why, I am particularly hurt by this, Cecily, to hear this. Especially since you did it when the weather was so charming.
Oh, it hardly would have been a really serious engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once. Besides, I forgave you before the week was out.
Oh, you are the sweetest, prettiest, loveliest little angel, Cecily.
I love your hair so much. Does it curl naturally?
Of course. With a little help from others.
I'm so glad.
You'll never break our engagement off again, will you, Cecily?
I don't think I could break it off now that we have actually met. Of course, there is the question of your name.
Oh, yes, of course.
Now, you mustn't laugh at me, darling, but it has always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone of the name of Ernest. There is something in that name that inspires one with absolute confidence.
What if my name was something else? It could be anything you might like maybe Algernon, for instance?
I don't like the name of Algernon.
Well, my dear, pretty, lovely little Cecily, I quite like the name of Algernon. It's a rather aristocratic name. Half of the chaps down at the bankruptcy court all have the name of Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, if my name was Algernon, could you not love me?
I might respect you. I might admire your character, but I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to give you my undivided attention.
Yes, of course. Your rector is here, I suppose, fully practiced in all the rites and ceremonials of the church.
Oh yes, Dr. Chausible is a most learned man. He's never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
All righty. I must go and see him on a most important christening. I mean on most important business. I shan't be away for more than half an hour.
Considering that this is the first time that we have actually met, and we have been engaged since February the 14th, it is so hard for you to leave me for such a long period as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is. I love his hair so much. I must enter his proposal into the diary.
Miss Fairfax has come to see Mr. Worthing on very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Uncle Jack in his library?
He went over in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Pray, tell the lady to come out here. Uncle Jack shouldn't be too long. And you can bring tea.
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax, probably one of those sweet old ladies associated with Uncle Jack in philanthropic work in London. I don't like women who are associated in philanthropic work. I think it's so forward of them.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray, let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew. What a very sweet name. Something tells me we are going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
How sweet of you to like me so much after such a short amount of time. Pray sit down.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
Yeah,
And you will always call me Gwendolyn, won't you?
if you wish.
Then that is all quite settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Perhaps this might be a favorable opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You have heard of Papa, I suppose?
I don't think so.
Outside the family circle, Papa, I'm glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think that is quite as it should be. The home seems to me to be the proper sphere for the man, and certainly once he begins neglecting his domestic duties, he becomes painfully effeminate, does he not? I don't like that. It makes men so very attractive. Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. It's part of a system, so do you mind my looking at you through my glasses?
Oh, not at all, Gwendolyn. I'm very fond of being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose?
Oh, no, I live here.
Really? Your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides here also?
Oh, no, I have no mother. No any relations.
Indeed.
My dear guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, have the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
I'm Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh, it is strange. He never mentioned me that he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I'm not sure, however, that the news inspires me with the feelings of unmixed delight. I'm very fond of you, Cecily. I've liked you ever since I met you, but I am bound to state that now that I know you are Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help but expressing a wish you were, well, a little older than you seem to be, not quite so alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly,
Pray do. I think when one has anything quite unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well, to speak with perfect candor, Cecily, I wish you were fully 42 and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honor. Disloyalty would be as impossible to him as deception. But even men of the noblest possible moral character can be extremely susceptible to the physical charms of others. Modern, no less than ancient history, supplies us with many most painful examples of what I refer to.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolyn. Did you say Ernest?
Yes?
Oh, but it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It's his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I'm afraid they haven't been on good terms for such a long time.
Yes, that accounts for it. And now that I think of it, I have never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems distasteful for most men. Cecily, you have lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if a cloud had come across a friendship like ours, would it not? Of course, you are quite sure it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian.
I'm sure. In fact, I'm going to be his.
I beg your pardon?
I need not make it a secret of it to you, Gwendolyn, but next week our little county newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact that next week Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
I fear there may be some slight error, Miss Cardew. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
You are under some slight misconception, Miss Fairfax. Ernest proposed to me exactly 5 minutes ago.
It is certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you wish to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read on the train. I am so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I'm afraid I have the prior claim.
You have no idea how much distress it would cause me if it caused you any mental or physical anguish. But clearly, since Ernest has proposed to you, he's changed his mind.
If the poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand.
Whatever entanglement my dear boy may have gotten himself into, I will never reproach him with it after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On an occasion of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? This is no time to wear the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I am glad to say that I have never seen a spade. It is obvious that our social spheres have been widely different.
Shall I lay the tea here as usual, Miss Fairfax?
Yes, as usual.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Oh yes, a great many. From the top of one of the hills, one can see 5 counties.
5 counties? I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose that's why you live in town.
Quite a well-kept garden this is, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were any flowers in the country.
Oh, flowers are quite common here, as people are in London.
Personally, I do not understand how anybody manages to exist in the country. If anybody who is anybody does. The country always bores me to death.
Ah, this is what the newspapers call agricultural depression, is it not? I believe the aristocrats are suffering from it just as much at present. Can I offer you some tea?
Thank you. Detestable girl, but I require tea.
Sugar.
No, thank you. Sugar's not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen at the best houses nowadays.
Hand that to Miss Fairfax.
You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and though I asked most distinctively for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature, but I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may have gone too far.
To save my poor, sweet, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
No doubt I am trespassing on your valuable time. You probably have many calls of a similar nature to make in the neighborhood.
Ernest! My own Ernest.
Gwendolyn, darling.
A moment. May I ask, are you engaged to be married to this young lady here?
To dear little Cecily? Of course not. What could have put such an idea in your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
Oh, I knew there must have been some sort of misconception. The man whose arm is present around your waist is my dear guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon?
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack. Oh.
This is Ernest.
My own one!
Pray, answer me a quick question. Are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
What young lady? To good heavens! Gwendolyn?
Good heavens, Gwendolyn! I mean to Gwendolyn.
Oh, no, of course not. Who could have put such an idea in your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I felt there might be some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman whose arm is at present around your shoulders is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncreiff.
Algernon Moncreiff! Are you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Is your name really John?
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked. But my name certainly is John. It's been John for years.
A gross deception has clearly been practiced on the both of us.
My poor wounded Cecily.
My sweet wronged Gwendolyn.
You will call me sister, will you not?
There's just one question I'd like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, there is just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it is of some importance to us to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolyn, Cecily, it is very painful for me to be forced to speak the truth. It is the first time in my life I have been reduced to such a painful position, and I'm really quite inexperienced at doing anything of the kind. However, I may tell you quite candidly that I have no brother Ernest. I have no brother at all. I have never had a brother, and I certainly have no intention of ever having one in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Had you never a brother of any kind?
Never, not even of any kind.
I'm I'm afraid it is quite clear, dear Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
It's not a pleasant position for a young girl to find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to come after us there.
No, men are so cowardly, aren't they?
This ghastly state of things is what you call bumbering, I suppose.
Yes, and a perfectly wonderful Bunbury. The most perfect Bunbury I've ever had.
Well, you have no right to Bunbury here.
That is absurd. One has the right to Bunbury anywhere one chooses. Every serious Bunburyist would know that.
Serious Bunburyist? Good heavens.
Well, one has to be serious about something to have any amusement in life. I am serious about Bunbury. What on earth you are serious about? I have no idea. About everything, I would suppose. You have such a trivial nature.
Well, the only small satisfaction I have in the whole of this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to run down to the country as often as you used to, Algy, and a very good thing too.
Oh? And what's about your brother? He's a little off-color, isn't he? You won't be able to come up to town as often as your wicked custom once was.
As for your conduct towards Miss Cardew, I think you're taking in a sweet, simple, innocent girl like that quite inexcusable, to say nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
Well, I can see no defense in you deceiving a brilliant, clever, well-mannered young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I wanted to be engaged to Gwendolyn, that is all. I love her.
Well, I wanted to be engaged to Cecily. That is all. I adored her.
Well, there is certainly no chance of your marrying Miss Cardew.
Yes, well, I certainly won't talk about my business here. The only people who ever do that are stockbrokers. And then again, only at dinner parties.
How you can sit there calmly eating muffins while we're in this horrible trouble, I can't make out. You seem to me to be perfectly heartless.
Well, I couldn't possibly eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get in my cuffs. Besides, the only way to eat muffins is quite calmly. That is the only way to eat them.
I'd say it's perfectly heartless you're eating muffins at all under the circumstances.
When I'm in trouble, eating is the only thing that ever consoles me. Indeed, when I'm in very great trouble, as any of my relations or close friends would tell you, I only ever accept food and drink. I am eating muffins right now because I am sad. Besides, I particularly like these muffins.
Well, that is no reason you should eat them all in that greedy way.
Please don't have the muffins. How would you have tea cake? I don't like tea cake.
Good heavens, I suppose a man might eat his own muffins in his own garden.
You just said it was perfectly ridiculous to be eating muffins.
I said it was perfectly ridiculous of you, under the circumstances. This is quite a different matter.
Yes, but the muffins are the same.
Algy, I wish to goodness you'd go.
I couldn't possibly leave. I haven't even had my dinner yet. The only people who ever skip dinner are vegetarians and other people like that. Besides, I have made arrangements to be christened under the name of Ernest at 6:15 by Dr. Chausible.
My dear fellow, the sooner you give up on that nonsense, the better. I have made arrangements myself this morning to be christened with Dr. Chausible at 5:30. I will naturally take the name of Ernest. Gwendolyn would wish it. You can't both be christened Ernest, it's absurd. Besides, I have every right to be christened. There's no evidence at all that I've ever been christened by anybody. I think it extremely probable I never was, and so does Dr. Chausible. You have been christened already.
Yes, exactly. I know my constitution can stand it. But you, I'm a little worried about you venturing on it now. You seem to forget that you very recently had a brother who was carried away by a severe chill. I think it's very worrisome.
But you said yourself a severe chill wasn't hereditary.
Indeed it wasn't, but science is constantly making wonderful improvements in things.
Well, that is nonsense. You only talk nonsense.
Please, do not go for the muffins. Please, go for the tea cake. I do not like tea cake.
I hate tea cake.
Then why on earth would you serve it to your guests? What views you have on hospitality?
Algernon, why don't you go? I have already told you I wanted you to go. I don't want you here.
I haven't finished my tea yet. And besides, there's still a muffin left.
fact that they did not follow me at once into the house, as anyone else would have done, seems to show that they have some sense of shame left.
They're eating muffins. That looks like repentance.
They don't seem to notice us at all. Couldn't you cough?
I haven't a cough.
They're looking at us. What effrontery!
They're approaching. How forward of them.
Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly, it's the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence seems to produce an unpleasant effect.
A most distasteful one.
But we will not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing, I have something very particular to say to you. Much depends on your reply.
Gwendolyn, your common sense is invaluable. Algernon, please kindly answer me one quick question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
In order that I might have an opportunity of meeting you, of course.
That seems like quite a satisfactory response, does it not?
Yes, dear, if you can believe him.
I don't, but that does not deny the absolute beauty of his answer.
True. In matters of grave importance, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer to me for pretending to have a brother? Was it so that you could come up to town to see me as often as possible?
Can you doubt us, Miss Fairfax?
I have the gravest doubts upon the subject. But I intend to crush them. This is not the moment for German skepticism. The answers do seem quite satisfactory, especially Mr. Worthing's. That seems to me to have the stamp of truth upon it.
I am quite satisfied with what Mr. Moncreiff had to say.
Then you think we should forgive them?
Yes, I mean no.
True. I had forgotten. There are principles at stake that one cannot surrender. Which of us should tell them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Could we not both speak at the same time?
An excellent idea. I needly always speak at the same time as other people. Will you take the time from me?
Certainly. Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier. That is all.
Our Christian names? Is that all? But we are to be christened this afternoon.
For my sake, are you prepared to do this terrible thing?
I am.
For my pleasure, are you prepared to face this fearful ordeal?
I am.
How absurd to talk of the equality of the sexes. When matters of self-sacrifice are concerned, men are infinitely beyond us.
We are.
They have moments of physical courage of which we women know absolutely nothing.
Darling.
Darling.
Ahem. Ahem. Lady Bracknell.
Good heavens.
What does this mean?
Merely that I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Come here. Sit down. Sit down here. Hesitation of any kind is a sign of mental decay in the young, of physical weakness in the old. Apprised, sir, of my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin. I followed her at once by luggage train. Her unhappy father is, I am glad to say, under the impression he is attending a more than usually lengthy lecture by the University Extension Scheme on the influence of a permanent income on thought. I do not propose to undeceive him. Indeed, I have never undeceived him on any matter. I will consider it wrong. But you will clearly understand from this point forward, all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease. On this point, as indeed on all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolyn, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And now as regards Algernon. Algernon!
Oh, yes, Aunt Augusta?
Is this the house in which your invalid friend Mr. Bunbury resides?
Oh, Bunbury. My friend Bunbury. Does he live here? No, Bunbury's dead.
Dead. His death must have been quite sudden. When did he die?
Bunbury? When did Bunbury die? I killed him.
How did he die?
Sorry, Aunt Augusta. Bunbury was quite exploded.
Exploded. Was he a victim of revolutionary outrage? I was not aware that Mr. Bunbury was interested in social legislation. If so, he is well punished for his morbidity.
Oh, silly me, Aunt Augusta. I meant that Bunbury, by him being quite exploded, that the doctors found out that he was found out. So the doctors found out he could not be alive, therefore Bunbury is dead. Bunbury is dead, that is all.
He seems to have had great confidence in the opinions of his physicians. I'm glad, however, that he made up his mind at the last to some definite course of action, and acted under proper medical advice. And now that we've gotten rid of this, Mr. Bunbury, may I ask, Mr. Worthing, who is that young person whose hand my nephew Algernon is holding in what seems to me to be a peculiarly unnecessary manner?
That lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
We are engaged to be married, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon?
We are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
I do not know whether there's something in the air of this particular part, but the amount of engagements that goes on seems to me to be considerably above the proper average the statistics have laid out for our guidance. I believe some preliminary inquiry on my part would not be out of place. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew associated with any of the large railway stations in London? I ask merely for information. Until yesterday, I was not aware that there were any families or persons whose origin was a terminus.
Lady Bracknell, Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square, Southwest, Gervase Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Spawn, Fifeshire, NB.
That is not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses always inspire confidence, even in tradesmen. But what proof have I of their authenticity?
I have carefully preserved the court guides of the period. They are open to your inspection, Lady Bracknell.
I have known strange errors in that publication.
Miss Cardew's family solicitors are Messrs. Markby, Markby, and Markby.
Markby, Markby, and Markby. Why, a firm of the very highest position in their profession. Indeed, I have heard one of the Mr. Markbys is occasionally to be seen at dinner parties. So far, I am satisfied.
How extremely kind of you. You'll also be pleased to hear that I have in my possession records of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, confirmation, and the measles, but the German and the English variety.
Ah, a life crowded with incidents, although perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young girl. I myself am not in favor of premature experiences. Gwendolyn, the time approaches for our departure. We have not a moment to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Weather, I had better ask you if Miss Cardew has any little fortune.
About £130,000 in the funds, that is all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell, so pleased to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Weather. £130,000. And in the funds, why, Miss Cardew seems to me a most attractive young lady now that I look at her. Few girls of the present day have any of the really solid qualities, any of the qualities that last and improve with time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of surfaces. Come here, dear. Sweet child, your dress is sadly simple, and your hair looks almost as nature might have left it. But we could soon alter that. A truly experienced Prince maid provides a really remarkable experience in a very brief space of time. I remember recommending one to young Lady Lansing, and in 3 months her own husband did not know her.
And in 6 months, nobody knew her.
Turn around, dear. No, the side view is what I want. Just as I expected, there are distinct social possibilities in your profile. In our day and age, the 2 weak points are its want of profile and its want of principle. Sitting a little higher, dear. They are worn high, just as present. Algernon,
Yes, Aunt Augusta?
there are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Well, I don't care twopence about her social possibilities. I love Cecily, and that is everything.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that. And of course, dear, you know that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend upon. But I do not approve of mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I didn't have a fortune to my name. But I didn't dream of letting him for a second of letting that stop me. Well, I suppose I must give you my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
You may take my hand. You may also call me Aunt Augusta in the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
I believe the marriage better take place quite soon.
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
To be frank, I am not in favor of long engagements. They give one the opportunity of finding out about one another's character. which I think is never advisable.
Of course, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon, Lady Bracknell, for interrupting you, but this engagement is quite out of the question. I am Miss Cardew's guardian, and she cannot legally marry without my consent until she comes of age. That consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is an extremely, may I say ostentatiously, eligible young man. He has, but he looks everything. What more could one desire?
It pains me very much to have to speak frankly to you about your nephew, but the truth is I don't approve at all of his moral character. I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon. Possible. He is an Oxonian.
I'm afraid there can be no possible doubt about the matter. This afternoon, while I was off in London on an important question of romance, he obtained admission to my house by the means of the false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name, he drank, I've just been informed by my butler, an entire pint bottle of Perrier Jouard Brut 89 I was specially reserving for myself. Continuing his disgraceful deception, he succeeded in the afternoon in alienating the affections of my only ward. He subsequently stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin. And what makes his conduct all the more heartless is that he knew from the very start that I have no brother, that I've never had a brother, and that I have no intention at all of ever having a brother, not even of any kind, in the future. I distinctly told him so myself yesterday afternoon.
Mr. Webb, after careful consideration, I have decided to entirely overlook my nephew's conduct towards you.
That is so very generous of you, Lady Bracknell. My own decision, however, is unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
Come here, dear. How old are you, dear?
Well, I am really only 18, but I always admit to 20 at evening parties.
You are perfectly right in making some slight alteration. Indeed, no woman should ever be quite accurate about her age. It looks so calculated. 18, but admitting to 20 at dinner parties. Well, it will not be very long until you are of age, and free from the restraints of tutelage. So I don't see why your guardian descent is, after all, a matter of any importance.
Pray excuse me, Lady Bracknell, for interrupting you again, but it is only fair to tell you that Miss Cardew does not legally become of age until she is 35.
That does not seem to me to be a grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. London society is full of women of the very highest birth who have, of their own free choice, remained at 35 for years. Lady Dumbleton is an instance in point. To my knowledge, she has been 35 ever since she arrived at the age of 40, which was now many years ago. So I see no reason why our dear Cecily should not be even more beautiful at the age you mentioned than she is at present. There will also be a very large acclamation of property.
Algy, could you wait for me till I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily.
Yes, I know, I felt it instinctively, but I know I'm not punctual myself, but I do like punctuality in others, and waiting even for marriage is quite out of the question.
Then, what are we to do, Cecily?
I don't know.
Mr. Webb, as Miss Cardew states positively that she cannot wait until she is 35 to be wed, a remark which I am bound to say shows a somewhat impatient nature, I would beg of you to reconsider your decision.
But my dear Lady Bracknell, the decision is entirely in your own hands. The moment you consent to my marriage with Gwendolyn, I will most happily allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
You know that what you propose is completely out of the question.
Then a passionate celibacy is all any of us can look forward to.
That is not the destiny I propose for Gwendolyn. Algernon, of course, can choose for himself. Come, dear. We have already missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more might expose us to comment on the platform.
Let's have these christenings to commence.
The christening, sir? Is that not somewhat premature?
Well, both of these men have shown interest to being christened this afternoon, Lady Bracknell.
At their age, the idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized. I will not hear of such excesses. Lord Bracknell would be highly displeased if he learned that this is the way in which you wasted your time and money.
Am I to believe that there will be no christenings this afternoon?
I don't think that, as things are now, it would be of much practical value to either of us, Dr. Chausible.
I'm grieved to hear this from you, Mr. Worthing. They savor the heretical views of the Anabaptists, views that I've completely refuted in at least 4 of my unpublished sermons. However, this mood seems particularly secular, so I'll be on my way to the church. In fact, for the last hour and a half, the pew opener has let me know that Miss Prism has been looking for me in the vestry.
Excuse me, Dr. Chausible. Did you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell?
Pray allow me to detain you for a moment. This matter may prove to be of vital importance to yourself and me. Is this Miss Prism a female of repellent aspect, remotely connected with education?
Well, Miss Prism is the spitting image of respectability, madame.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask what position she holds in your household?
Well, I'm a celibate.
Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell, has been for the past 3 years Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion.
In spite of what I hear of her, it is obvious I must see her. Let her be sent for.
Well, there she is. She is nigh.
I was told to expect to meet in the vestry, dear Canon. I've been waiting there for an hour and 3/4.
Come here, Miss Prism. Here. Miss Prism, where is that baby? 28 years ago, Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house, number 104 Upper Burmester Street, in charge of a perambulator that contained a baby of the male sex. You never returned. A few weeks later, through the elaborate investigations of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was discovered at midnight in a remote corner of Bayswater. But the baby was not there. It contained the manuscript for a more than usually revolting novel of sentimentality. So where was that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I must admit, I do not know where the baby is. I only wish I knew where the baby was. But on that day, which you mentioned, will forever be branded into my memory, I was getting ready to take the baby and the 3-volume novel out, but by mistake put the baby in the handbag and the 3-volume novel in the carriage. I'll forever be ashamed of my actions.
But where did you deposit the handbag?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
This is a matter of no small importance to me, Miss Prism. I insist on knowing where you deposited the handbag that contained that infant.
I left it in the cloakroom of one of London's larger railway stations.
What railway station?
The Victoria Brixton line.
I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolyn, you'll wait for me here?
If you are not too long, I will wait here for you all my life.
Well, what do you believe, Lady Bracknell?
I need hardly suspect Dr. Chausible. I need not tell you that in families of high position, strange coincidences are not supposed to occur. They are hardly considered a thing.
Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
Your guardian is very emotional, Major.
Sounds as if you are arguing. I dislike arguments of any kind. They are always vulgar and often convincing.
It has seemed to have stopped now.
I wish you would arrive at the conclusion.
The suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
Is this the handbag, Miss Prism? Examine it carefully before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends on your answer.
It seems to be mine. Yes. Here's an injury that happened in earlier, happier days. And here, in the lining, is a stain from a tempered beverage that exploded. And here, on the lock, are my initials I had put there in an invasive moment. This bag is undoubtedly mine. I am very happy to have it back.
More has been restored to you than this handbag, Miss Prism. I was the baby you placed in it.
You?
Yes, Mother.
Mr. Worthing, there is some mistake. I am unmarried.
Unmarried? Well, I do not deny that is a serious blow. But then again, who has the right to cast a stone against one who has suffered? Cannot repentance wipe out an act of folly? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Mother, I forgive you.
Mr. Worthing, there is some mistake. There is the person who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell, I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me who I am?
I'm afraid the news I have to give you will not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncreiff, and consequently, Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother. Well, then I have a brother after all. Cecily, how could you have ever doubted that I had a brother? Dr. Chausible, my unfortunate brother. Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolyn, my unfortunate brother. You young scoundrel, Algy, you must treat me with more respect in the future. You've never behaved to me like a brother in all your life.
I must say it must have been because I was out of practice. But I'll certainly do better from here on out in the future.
My own. But what own are you? What is your Christian name now that you've become someone else?
I had quite forgotten that matter. Your decision on my name is irrevocable, I suppose.
I never changed, except in my affections.
What a noble nature you have, Gwendolyn.
Well, then the question must be cleared up at once. Lady Bracknell, at the time when Miss Prism deposited me in the handbag, had I been christened already?
Every luxury that money could buy, including christening, was lavished on you by your fond and doting parents.
Then I was christened. That settles it. Now what name was I given? Let me know the worst.
Well, being the eldest son, you were naturally christened after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's Christian name?
I cannot at the present moment recall what the general's Christian name was. I have no doubt he had one. He was eccentric, I admit, but only in later years. And that was a result of the climate, and marriage, and indigestion, and other things of that sort.
Algy, can you not recollect what our father's Christian name was?
I'm sorry, old chap. My father and I were never on good speaking terms. That is due to the fact that he died before I was 1.
His name would no doubt appear in the army list of the period.
The general was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life. However, I am sure his name would appear in any military directory.
The army lists of the last 40 years are here. This delightful record should have been my constant study. M. Generals. Malum, Moxbum, Migley, what ghastly names they have. Markby, Magby, Mobbs, Moncreiff. Lieutenant, 1840. Captain, Lieutenant Colonel, Colonel. General, 1869. Christian names. Ernest, John. Gwendolyn, I always told you my name was Ernest. It is. I mean, naturally, it is Ernest.
Yes, I remember the general was called that. I knew I had a reason for disliking the name.
Ernest. My own Ernest. I knew from the first that you could have no other name.
Gwendolyn, it is very painful for a man to find out, quite suddenly, that all his life he has been speaking nothing but the truth. Can you forgive me?
I can, for I feel you are sure to change.
My own one.
Letitia!
Frederick, at last.
Cecily, at last.
Gwendolyn, at last.
My nephew, you seem to be displaying signs of triviality.
On the contrary, Aunt Augusta, I have now realized, for the first time in my life, the vital importance of being earnest.
We have a caramel apple pie.
Whoa.
We have maybe the prettiest apple pie here.
Yeah. Okay. We have maybe a prettier pumpkin pie.
A Pete's pie.
Apple pie with a lattice top.
Clocking in at a strong 22 ounces, we have a beautiful old-fashioned pecan pie.
It's just apple pie.